Hi folks, it's me Josh Clark, the Restoration Coordinator for the Anne Arundel County Watershed Stewards Academy. Today I'm going to be going over the basics of rainscaping. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. If you haven't seen part 1 on stormwater, I would encourage you to do so before watching this presentation. This presentation will review stormwater, and then I will discuss traditional methods of stormwater management. From there, I will dive into rainscaping and common rainscaping practices. I'm going to briefly review what stormwater is. In developed areas, precipitation falls on what is known as impervious surfaces. Impervious surfaces are surfaces that allow little or no infiltration into the ground. Other than exposed natural rock croppings, impervious surfaces are completely human-created and are an unnatural part of most ecosystems. Examples of impervious surfaces are streets, roofs, parking lots, patios, walkways, or anything else that does not allow water to flow through and into the ground. Impervious surfaces are the main contributor to stormwater runoff. Stormwater runoff is precipitation that would otherwise have been retained on site in natural forests or meadows. Everything that falls on an impervious surface, pollution, trash, animal waste, chemicals, oil, sediment, etc., washes off of those surfaces during rain events, often on a direct path to local streams or water bodies. Stormwater degrades the health of our waterways and communities. There are many factors that affect stormwater runoff. Steeper slopes cause rainwater to sheet off and run downhill faster than shallower slopes, which allow it to slow down and infiltrate. Vegetation's root systems allow precipitation to infiltrate. The plant material above ground holds precipitation, allowing it to evaporate away. A lack of vegetation creates erosion that can carry sediment with it into waterways. Moist soil can clog precipitation from infiltrating, allowing for more water to run off. Dry, compacted soil can act like an impervious surface. Land use and types of soil affect the amount of infiltration and runoff. Now I will briefly go over traditional stormwater management. In regards to precipitation and stormwater, our goal is to make sure our yards and roadways are clear from standing water. Traditional stormwater management techniques involve redirecting the natural flow of water through gutters and into storm drains, often draining entire communities. This volume of water would then be released into our local waterways or be sent to detention or retention ponds and then released into our waterways. A stormwater detention pond is an open basin built by excavating below ground or constructing above ground berms or embankments. The detention pond temporarily stores stormwater runoff and slowly releases it through a specially designed outlet or control structure. Detention ponds typically are designed to drain completely within a few hours or days. Styles vary greatly, from well-manicured turf to natural-appearing plantings. On the pro side, detention ponds can be less expensive to install and maintain than wet retention ponds. There are, however, a few downsides to detention ponds. They can take up a lot of space in communities. They do not treat stormwater. If they are poorly designed or do not empty fast enough, they can become breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Finally, they can be considered ugly and detract from property value. A stormwater retention pond, which is also known as a wet pond or wet pool, is an open basin that has a pool of water year-round. The volume of the retention pond allows sediment to settle out as stormwater runs in. Wetland vegetation is typically planted to provide additional treatment by removing nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen. Typically, there are 2 pools. Stormwater flows into the first pool, where sediment settles before moving into the second pool. The water is then discharged to streams and groundwater. Retention ponds also have additional temporary storage above the permanent water level to detain and slowly release stormwater. They are often fenced for safety. On the pro side, their design and function is pretty simple in that they naturally process water without additional equipment. By removing sediment and nutrients, it can improve water quality, although not to the level of rainscaping practices we'll discuss later. Their size and design allow for treating multiple size precipitation events, which helps reduce stormwater and control floods. Finally, because they contain water and aquatic vegetation, they do provide habitat cover for different animals. One major con of retention ponds is that they can be a drowning hazard due to their water, meaning they have to be fenced in for safety. They also require a lot of space to function properly. If retention ponds are designed or maintained improperly, they can become sources of pollution for sediment and excess nutrients. Detention and retention ponds were the main tools in the tool belt of stormwater professionals for decades before the early 2000s. At that point, there was a shift from this traditional infrastructure that drained stormwater out of communities as quickly as possible to a new paradigm. This shift centered on the idea of letting developed areas act more like natural areas that treated stormwater more locally. Rainscaping is the culmination of that shift. Rainscaping is also known as green infrastructure or low impact development. The EPA defines these techniques as systems and practices that use or mimic natural processes that result in the infiltration, evapotranspiration, or use of stormwater in order to protect water quality and associated aquatic habitat. This translates very simply to mitigating stormwater runoff by slowing it down, spreading it out, and soaking it in. I am now going to discuss 6 common rainscaping practices that you can install at your home and in your community to treat stormwater. The first rainscaping technique is rainwater harvesting. Using a rain barrel or cistern is the most basic rainscaping tool. Connecting one of these devices to your downspout captures the first flush of stormwater, which is oftentimes the most polluted. Rain barrels or cisterns can be installed just about anywhere, provided there is room for the device to sit up against a house and a level solid surface on which the barrel may rest. Rainwater harvesting is best suited in areas with a high water table or wet sites where infiltration practices might not work. They can also be installed under trees as they do not interfere with root systems. This practice is also great in densely developed sites as they do not take up a lot of room. Rain barrels and cisterns come in all shapes and styles and can be painted, disguised, hooked up together, or fitted with a spigot or soaker hose. In a typical summer thunderstorm, a 500 square foot roof collects 330 gallons of water over 6 rain barrels. The next rainscaping technique I'll be discussing is conservation landscaping. Conservation landscapes are gardens with native plants that replace lawns or hard surfaces. Conservation landscapes provide wildlife habitat and absorb stormwater. Conservation landscapes are slightly lower than the surrounding ground so that they can absorb runoff. Conservation landscapes may be planted anywhere traditional landscape beds are used. They can also be designed and maintained in a very formal manner or have a more natural aesthetic. Conservation landscapes plants deep root systems, loosen soil, and allow water to soak into the ground. Precipitation also clings to the leaves and stems until it evaporates. If you use conservation landscapes as a replacement for lawns, you reduce air pollution due to less mowing, use fewer pesticides and fertilizers, and use less water. The use of native plants also provides great habitat for wildlife, and because they are from the Chesapeake Bay area, require less chemicals and water than non-native ornamental plants. Rain gardens are bowl-shaped gardens that capture stormwater and slowly allow it to infiltrate into the ground. Because rain gardens are designed to hold water for a period of time, there are considerations that need to be taken into account when installing them. They should not be installed within 10 feet of a building's foundation or near a septic system. They should not be installed on a steep slope. Rain gardens should not hold water longer than 48 hours or it becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes. For that reason, they should be installed in soils that drain well and should be at least 2 feet above the water table. Rain gardens should also be installed away from the root systems of trees and utilities. Downspout disconnection is exactly what it sounds like. Rather than directing downspout water to impervious surface, you can direct it to a more pervious surface, such as a conservation landscape, rain garden, planted bed, or rain barrel. Even lawn is better than having it go into the storm drain. If you decide to disconnect your downspout from going onto an impervious surface, be careful to always direct it away from any buildings. Pervious hardscapes are hard, porous surfaces located over a gravel base that collects water and allows it to soak into the ground. There are many different kinds of pervious hardscapes, but they typically fall into the categories of pervious pavers, pervious concrete, or pervious asphalt. Pervious hardscapes can function the same as other hardscapes in that they can carry the weight of vehicular traffic if designed and installed properly. This is also a great practice in urban areas where there might not be a lot of space to incorporate green space. It should be noted that pervious hardscapes can be very expensive to install and maintain. The maintenance of pervious hardscapes should be taken into consideration when deciding to install this practice. Keeping sediment and debris out of these systems is essential for the function, meaning sweeping and vacuuming of the surface is a major part of their upkeep and can be expensive to do the right way. Finally, sometimes the easiest thing to do is to remove impervious surface to increase stormwater infiltration. If you have old patios, sidewalks, or driveways that are no longer being used, you may consider removing them and replacing them with any of the other practices I've discussed here today. This has been a very brief introduction to common rainscaping practices that you or your community can use to treat stormwater. If you are interested in learning more, I would encourage you to go to our website, aawsa.org. There you will find more in-depth material about rainscaping solutions, including design guidelines and installation techniques. Thanks for listening to Rainscaping 101. As always, feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. Have a great day.